Well, it's so hard to believe that the month of April is almost over, and just around the corner is National Foster Care Awareness Month. I say this all the time. I'm always honored that, we give kids in foster care a month, but in my family and our organization and the organizations that, I spotlight on fostering change, it is every month for us. It is every month for us. Most of you who will follow me through social media, you know that I have for probably the last 6 months really have pushed when it comes to our older kids who are in foster care. I remember the day that Alex came to our home, this 18-year-old boy who had been in the system for so many years, who, really truly didn't think that he was ever going to have a forever family. And just knowing and seeing the love that he brought to our family. I watch him as he's heading off to college with his little brother. By the way, they're going to the same college. But, the thing that I want each and every one of you to learn today, and I'm so, so excited about our next guest, is about the older kids who are in the system. The fact is that we all know that we run through this system like we're on a white horse to save these children when they're these cute little toddlers. But when they start getting to be around 15 and 16 and 17, all of a sudden we think of them as our problem. But the problem is we actually have created them. We are the ones who have actually done all that we did to make them where they are today. So, without any further ado, my next guest, Randi Thompson. She is with Kidsave International. Randi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Let me tell you something, Randy. When I read about your organization, it just was this light bulb moment of hope. As someone who, as myself, I grew up in foster care. At the age of 18, I aged out and I lived on the streets of Northern Virginia, my entire senior year of high school because there was no one there to help me. There was no one there that cared. And even though I had come into the system at the age of 12, once that check stopped at 18, I no longer belonged to anyone except for the streets. And I was fortunate. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. And, all of us who aged out, I'm the only one who actually truly made it. And so I'd love to dive right in and tell us exactly what is Kids Save?
Well, Kidsave is an organization that, as you said, works with the older kids that are growing up in foster care and orphanages, both in the United States and around the world. And we started it because we were originally, I was a communications person, and I was in a country overseas and saw these kids growing up in orphanages. And I thought, well, look, I can do something to help them, right? I can do a little pro bono. Who's trying to get these kids out of institutions? I was seeing older kids that were just languishing in care, and did a little research, tried to find somebody that would love our brilliant communication services, and we didn't find anybody that was really working on behalf of the older kids. And as a communications professional, I thought, what do you do? How do you get these kids back in the community? Because that's really what you have to do. They're hidden. Nobody thinks about them. Nobody knows that there are children all over, growing up in foster care, but they have to meet them. And yet our system isn't set up to meet them. Our system is set up that if you know you want to adopt, then you put in an application and then you get matched. But there aren't a lot of people saying, can I adopt that 15-year-old boy?
Right.
Can I, just bring that cute little kid
No,
into this,
yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing is that, it absolutely blows my mind, knowing that here in the United States, we have 22,000 children who age out of foster care average every single year. And the fact that we know that these kids age out and close to 70% of them become homeless within 24 hours. I mean, these are our kids, these are our kids. And it's just like and the thing that I see the biggest issue, Randy, is that we wait until these kids turn 15 and 16, and then we start tapping them and saying, hey, let's figure out what you're going to do with your life. But as well as I do, by the time they're that age, they're so pissed off at us. They're so pissed off. They have been bounced around from home to home to home. They've had no stability whatsoever. They have trust issues. They have trauma issues, all of these things that we're not facing. And then all of a sudden, we're going to start to say, hey, let's plan your life. I know the kids that I meet, they're just dying to turn 18 so they can get the hell away from everybody. And I
Exactly.
think that that's where we fail.
Oh, absolutely. By the time kids are referred to us, they've often been in care 6 to 8 years. They've moved as many times. They didn't start in the year in the same school. They couldn't join a sports team, couldn't really get a guidance counselor who was involved with them. So the concept that we came up with at Kidsave is if we can bring these kids back in the community where people can meet and get to know them, we can connect them to families. And if not an adoptive family, a mentor, because as you said, by the time the kids get to us, they're often angry, frustrated, and they've got such boundaries that they've set up and barriers because they've been hurt too many times. So a lot of them don't even want to be adopted. So in our program, we don't tell the kids they need to be adopted. We just say, if you're open to a connection with an adult, please come to our events. We have events every month in Los Angeles, Houston, and in Virginia, where we bring children in from the foster care system that are referred to us from their respective governments. And they try it, just try it once, come, and they come with their hoodies up and their headphones in and, their heads are down, and it takes them a while, but we do this at their pace. The whole idea is to give them the dignity, to give them the empowerment to have a say in what happens to them. Because as you know, kids in foster care have really not had a lot of say in what happens. They're bounced
No.
from place to place. They're told, go here, go here. So
Yeah.
in our program, we bring them in, and adults who are interested in helping a child, they might want to adopt, or they might just want to help a child in foster care. They might want to mentor that child. They'll come in, and we have these events. Sometimes people call it a little bit akin to speed dating, but it's really because everybody gets to meet everybody else. We do activities and we rotate around. So by the end of each event, where we also feed them a lot, because with teenagers, you got to feed
With teenagers.
you got to give them
Hey,
food.
I got 5 of them, so I get it.
So sometimes they just come for the food in the beginning, and then later they come for the people, because they'll come in and they'll say, why is everybody smiling? Because we want to get to know you. Why? Because they haven't had that. But at the end of each event, the kids get to say, the adults as well, say, who would they like to spend more time with at the next event? And the kids do the same thing. But you know how people always have kids' pictures? Well, at the end of our events, we have adult pictures, and the kids get to
Oh,
circle that they like. So
I absolutely love that.
it puts them in the driver's seat. It takes back some of the power for them, who
Yes.
they want to get to know, who they want to spend time with, and who might ultimately be their parent. And, we said a lot of these kids say, I don't want to be adopted. I don't. But you know what, Rob? Once I get to know you, I might want to be adopted by you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're not a stranger to me anymore. And the same thing with the families. They come in and they say, well, I can't have a child who has behavioral issues or is acting out sexually, and it's, come on, our kids have a lot of trauma.
Of course, of
A
course.
lot
And the
of trauma.
fact is, by the way, kids in general,
Have a lot of
they
trauma.
have a lot of trauma.
That's
Kids in
true.
general have a lot of trauma. It's one of the things here that we make sure of is that we never call them foster children. We call them children who are experiencing foster care. And the
Exactly.
reason for that is that we have realized over the last 13 years is that when I walk into a room and I talk about children, people's heart gets a little warm. They really start to get warm. But when I say a foster child, the first thing they think is, what did that kid do wrong?
Yeah.
What kind of problems does that kid have? What kind of mental illnesses? And we've noticed that we, because of labeling these children, that,
So,
society itself. Randy, one of the things that it's been I've been so curious about, I even wrote about it in my memoir, is that I feel that as a society, we are not educated enough about children in foster care because we've made them the backseat kids, the disposable kids, that we only tell the bad stories of the kids, that we haven't educated ourselves. And a good example is I live in a very small town, and I never forget, I went to our minister and I said, by the way, Reverend Esther, I said, has a social worker ever called and asked to come and talk to our congregation about being foster parents or mentoring? And she said, Rob, she says, since you and your husband came to this church with your children, nobody ever talked about foster care. And I said, that really bugged me. And then I started doing research and I found out that the reason that it wasn't happening is because we lived on one side of the track. Because we lived on one side of the track, they think we didn't care. They think that, because you're in such a certain wealth level, that you don't care about kids in foster care. But I'm here to tell you that's not true. That is not true. I believe that there are so many people out there that want to mentor, that want to go. And by the way, listen up, viewers. You always reach out to me. We have a huge following in the state of Virginia. It's my home state. We also in LA. We have thousands among thousands and thousands of people.
And
This
we
is
need
your
families.
opportunity. You always reach out to me and say, Rob, what more can I do? Rob, what more can I do? This is your opportunity. Your opportunity is go to Kidsave International. Okay. Learn about them, join their group. But you know what? Do me a favor. Do me a favor. And I ask you guys to do this a lot, and I know how much you do this. Open up your wallet and give some love, because I'm going to tell you something. This could not happen if it wasn't for people donating. They were not able to do these meet and greets. I know for a fact, and Randy, I have to tell you, I was in Florida and I was with a bunch of kids, older kids, and we were giving out cases. And I remember a young girl, she was pulling out all of her stuff, and she looked at me and she said, Mr. Rob, she says, why did somebody do this? And I said, why did somebody do what? And she said, why did somebody give me all of this brand new stuff in this beautiful backpack? And I looked at her and I said, you know what, honey, you don't have to know someone to love someone. You really don't. And I think that that's what people need to hear, is the fact that they can walk into this room not knowing what's going to happen, but could
Right.
truly fall in love with one of these kids.
Yeah. And they can, make doesn't everybody have a couple of weekends a month for a child?
Yes.
Really? I mean,
Yes.
that's all we ask of our families, is that you don't have to want to spend your life with a child, but if you give a child 2 weekends a month, spend 2 days a month with that child, you can make such a difference.
Yeah.
And for families, they'll come in, and one of the really unique things about our program, there's a lot of mentoring programs that it's one-on-one. But in our program, the idea is you want to get these kids exposed to your whole network. So you're exposing them to your families. Once our families are approved, they can have the kids overnight in their homes on the weekends, and
I
they can
love
take them.
that.
So they're able to show the kids what a stable family might look like, because a lot of our kids, unfortunately, haven't had that opportunity to really know what family is. And so really what they're getting, that ability, maybe they'll end up living in the family, maybe not, but it's somebody to help guide them on their next chapter, as opposed to, as you said, when you came out of foster care, who did you have? We have families that, kids move in with them after they're out of foster care. And we have families who ultimately want to adopt, and kids who say, I thought I'd never want to be adopted, but after I see you, maybe so. And families come in and they, with our kids don't look good on paper. They
Oh,
look,
of course not.
they've had
Of course,
so much
it's this,
fun.
it's the same thing I say about when judges make decisions about kids, okay? You're making a decision based on a
Piece
folder.
of paper. Right.
On a folder. You're not making a decision based on the fact that you got to know this kid. I tell the story about my son Alex. We had no desire to adopt another child. We already had four kids. Our kids, our first four kids arrived, they were 6 months, two, 2, and 4, and they were now at the teenage years. And so I never was it on our radar to have a fifth child. But I will tell you, when I met this young boy, there was some spark that it was like I had to have him meet my family. And I remember calling his foster parents up and asking if he could come and have dinner with us. And he went and came and had dinner with us, and we're sitting in a restaurant. And my 10-year-old son at the time, he's now 16, he looks at his brother and he says, you can order anything off that menu and my dads don't care. And he says, I can order anything. And my son said, yeah, I'm getting the steak fajitas. And my daughter Amaya looked over at Alex and said, Alex, haven't you ever been to Guapo's? And Alex was like, I don't remember the last time somebody took me to a restaurant.
Right.
Small things like that. That was the moment that I looked at my children and I could see the empathy flow out of their eyes. And I knew at that moment that he was meant to live with us. And we went from him coming on weekends to finally petitioning the courts, because I mean, he literally was 2 months away from aging out. And we petitioned the courts and said, listen, we don't have our foster care license. We have no desire to get them again. It's expired, but we want Alex and Alex wants us. And the courts approved it. And the only thing we asked is that we didn't want a stipend. I wanted Alex to know that we truly wanted him. So it was a year later, we're sitting around the table just chatting, talking, and he looked at me and he said, Pops, he said, do you think you and Dada will adopt me? And I was like, what? I was like, you're not going anywhere. I was like, what are you? He was like, no. He's like, I want to be adopted. He was like, I want to have the same last name as my brothers and my sister.
Right. Yeah.
Randy, I'm telling you something. These kids are remarkable. All of these kids are
They're
remarkable.
so resilient. I mean, they've had to be resilient. When I think of some of the things that our kids in foster care have been through, I mean, I'm an adoptive parent myself, but my kids were like yours, very young. It would floor them, the things that our children in foster care have had to endure. So if we see
Even
that,
what they've endured in foster homes.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's not their home, they're not seen as a member of many of the families. And I want to qualify that because some foster families are absolutely
Of
wonderful. We have
course, of
foster
course.
parents
And by the
who
way, I say it all the time, and I get the hate emails. I remind people all the time. It's just it's like humans in general. Some humans are just amazing. Other humans are just total assholes. And it's just like when it comes to foster parents, there are some foster parents out there that are the most amazing people in the world. But we have to be realistic and let the people know that there are foster families out there that the social workers turn their head and still allow a child there, even though they wouldn't put their own child there.
there's such a need for foster families. I mean, there just
Yes.
aren't enough foster families. So if we can work to get these kids into loving permanent families, or at least mentors to help them while they're living in foster care, it's a major change. And people, if you take somebody who looks bad on paper and you meet them, it really changes how people look at it. Instead of it's an obstacle, it becomes an opportunity that they can help.
Yeah.
We'll say to families and say, you said you couldn't have a kid like this. Yeah, but I can help this child. And
Right.
that's, they now have met them. And the same thing goes for the kids. We have a lot of children that have grown up in very homophobic environments or grown up in areas where they don't know the families that are coming forward. We're an all children, all families kind of an organization, and we have a lot of families who come in who are LGBTQ, and some of the kids say to us, no, that's not what I want. And then they meet them. They meet the family and they write down the name and they say, you said you weren't open to an LGBTQ family. And say, well, I like them. Of course, because you now know them. Now it's not, now you're doing your judgment based
Yeah.
on a person for the families and for the kids. So, we've really found it's an amazing, successful program. It works wherever in any culture that we put it in, whether it's international or domestic. When people meet kids in need and they see them as people, it changes everything.
Yeah, I will tell you, I love the fact of what you said about meeting the child and not the folder, because I do believe that. I believe that if you meet the child first, if you really have that one-on-one connection, because that's what happened to us. I mean, we got the one-on-one connection, we had all the weekends of fun and dinners, and then all of a sudden, the courts allowed
Full
us
disclosure.
to read his folder, and we were shocked
Of
and
course.
had what he had gone through and the number of institutions he had been in and I remember thinking to myself, wow, I wonder if I would have even been open to him sleeping in our home if I just would have gone by what I read that some social worker had written down. But here I saw this bright, driven, loving, kind young boy who just wanted to be loved. That's
You have our model in a capsule there, really. I
um,
mean, and you and I both know that our kids have gone through a lot of trauma. So it's not for the faint of heart.
no.
Family has to be really dedicated to help the kids work through their trauma. But I think what they see when they have them get to know them as an individual is that there's so much potential. I mean, our kids have so much potential and they need somebody to help them to put one foot in front of the other. All of our kids want to go to college. Horrible statistics about college. 3% graduate.
Yeah.
Every child in my programs say they want to go to college. If they have a mentor or they have a family to help them to figure out how do you get those credits? How do you do the you know, the tutorials because a lot of our kids are behind in school.
Right,
They
right.
need that. And we can boost those graduation rates. And ultimately, that's going to help everybody.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. We definitely need to connect because we have a program called that we rolled out called Pathways to Success. We actually have scholarships out to kids who are in our foster care system. We actually have colleges that have signed up to do free mentoring for financial aid to teach them how to
Right.
do their FAFSA. We also have people who in the community who actually will take the mentor the child on through the application process and how to, help with housing. And so, and it's something that I'm a true believer that there are so many things out there that we can offer the kids. The problem is that we don't let them know that. Social workers they've got stacks this high, the folders. The last thing they're thinking about is teaching a child how to fill out a FAFSA, and take it from a dad of 5 kids. I have 3 heading off to college in the fall.
Challenge.
So
Right. Challenge for you, and you've done it before, right?
let me tell you, it's a lot of paperwork. It's like, right now we're like picking dorms and I mean, it's overwhelming. And my kids have dads to help them with. Can
Yeah.
you imagine that kid who has no one? So
Nobody.
I'm definitely, listen, you've got a couple of galas that are coming up.
We do. We have a gala in Washington, D.C. on May 29th. We've got one in Los Angeles on June 7th and one in Houston, our newest and our great program. It's the first gala we're having in Houston on June 21st.
That
We
is awesome.
also have a hike that's coming up in the fall. So I'll want to get back with you on that because we're trying to get hike teams all around the country to hike for foster youth. It's called
Oh,
Hike.
I absolutely love that. And like I said, the more we continue to talk about kids who are in foster care, the more that we normalize this. And as I've said this so many times, Nelson Mandela said it clearly. We as a society are judged by the way we treat our children. And kids in foster care don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They belong to us. They belong to us. And we truly need to make sure that we take care of them. Listen up, everybody. This has been another amazing episode. I'm so lucky that every single time I get to do these episodes, not only do I get to meet amazing humans like my friend Randy, I also get to hear about some amazing opportunities to see the brighter future for a child in our foster care system. So, as I asked you to do, you in LA, you in Texas, you in Virginia, and by the way, Maryland, DC, we're the DMV. So Virginia is not a far drive. So whether you're in Maryland or DC, you can take that drive as well. But give a little time. Give a little time because don't ever forget when you invest in a child, you actually invest in our future. They are our leaders of tomorrow. So why would we not invest in them? Randy, I want to say thank you so much.
And I just want to say one thing to your listeners. Our program in Virginia, Los Angeles, and in Houston is called Weekend Miracles. So on our website, go to Weekend Miracles and figure out how to sign up for orientation. And then every single month in those cities, we have programs. We have opportunities to meet youth in foster care who need someone to care about them.
Well, listen up, everybody. We're going to have the link right here. So we're going to make it very easy for you. You're going to be able to click right here and it'll take you directly to their website, show them the love, sign up, and make a difference. Everybody, go have a great day.